You ever notice how Nintendo's like all down to clown with the apocalypse recently? I'm ready to call it now. It's officially a trend for a favorite family-friendly company to place high-profile franchises in a post-apocalypse setting. But Nintendo dystopias aren't ever that bad in the first place. You know, we got Link waking up in a ruined world ravaged by a century of war where every step through Hyrule contains a new idyllic countryside view. Then you got the Inklings keeping it funky and fresh long after humanity dies out with their musical paradise. And last but not least, we got Kirby, washing up on the shore of a deserted city with the adorable puppy foxes and the bright blue skies and all the new best friends. Of course, Kirby diehards are no stranger to this series' dystopic revelry. Kirby has been kicking it in the end times long before these newbies. At this point, it ain't a Kirby game if some Belphegorian demonic hellspawn isn't set loose somewhere in Popstar. But Kirby's true demon has seemingly been vanquished by the developers of HAL. After 3 long decades, Kirby's finally entered the third dimension. And Iwata asks, longtime Kirby series producer and current president of HAL, Shigefumi Kawase, details an 11-year period where Kirby failed to materialize on Nintendo home consoles. For one reason or another, these concepts never came together, and it seems that the more powerful the hardware, the harder it was to retain Kirby's simplicity. You could argue Kirby's first foray into 3D was Kirby 64, but that was aesthetic only, as the explorable action plane was still a straight 2D shot. Similar to Klonoa, shout out, before Forgotten Land, Kirby had yet to take shape properly in 3 dimensions outside of small experimental experiences on 3DS and that one time in City Trial. The era where successful 2D platformers were all making the jump to 3D is long over. It's not 1996 anymore, so it's a bit ironic that Kirby's jump took the longest. The promise of a big technical leap for an iconic platformer in 2022 is both a very quaint and monumental idea, which is exactly how I describe the pleasures of Kirby at his best. Kirby games start with a quaint charm that grows cosmic by the time you've completed it. The game is one thing on its surface. Kirby himself is just a hungry, sleepy blob friend with godlike powers beyond that of any being. It's simple, much like his canonical favorite birthday cake. Once you slice into a Kirby game, you are welcome to a host of flavorful layers, optimized for premium mouthfeel. This game had me go in mouthful mode for every level, collectible, achievement, and mechanic, and boy, did it taste great. I saved every Waddle Dee, collected every capsule toy, beat every tilt and roll level, and rose victorious at the game's post-game ending. I went full-on completionist for Kirby in the Forgotten Land, and it was more than worth the calories. After being sucked into a large vortex that suddenly appeared to a pop star, Kirby meets a new partner character named Elfilin, and together they work to rescue his friends from the evil Beast Pack. The game's 6 worlds are bedecked with a mixture of nature and industrial urban structures. The levels are restrained and mostly linear experiences similar to Super Mario 3D World, or even more accurately Astrobot Rescue Mission. However, the focus of Forgotten Land is less on platforming, with more attention placed on interesting puzzles, beat-em-up style scenarios, and secret hunting. There are a few levels where the designers open up the play space, setting up a bit of a jungle gym of hub challenges a la Mario 64, but these are few and far between. There are many delectable collectibles scattered throughout each of the stages, with the game heavily encouraging repeat playthroughs to find every last one of them. While the levels themselves aren't ever too long, they feel bigger thanks to the wealth of creative design choices and moments of cinematic weight given to the environments thanks to all the sick environmental design and camera angles. The camera is such a gift. The burden of perspective is lifted from the player's responsibility. In a vast majority of AAA games, camera control is something that's typically forced into the player's hands. Like it's basically a given that one of your 2 analog sticks is going to be dedicated to the thing, and while it's totally fine and even necessary in some genres, it has led to many third-person games looking more or less the same from a perspective. This lack of need for a player-controlled camera in Kirby allows HAL to present its level from all different types of clever and exciting angles with no detriment to gameplay. There's no fiddling with the camera control. Instead, its sole responsibility is to helpfully guide the player along with a nary a hiccup or awkward angle. The game is meant to feel like a big deal for Kirby, and the way HAL keeps control of the camera actually helps this endeavor. The seamless transition from opening cutscene to gameplay on the beach lets you know this game means business, and the polish too is incredible. The UI is so sleek, and visuals are just excellent. The overworld map is a fluid and fun experience with its own little secrets to discover. The menus are simple and easy to use with pleasant sound cues and music. Most of all, the game controls like a dream. Kirby is quick and responsive, as well as retaining all of his innate abilities that he was able to perform in his prior 2D outings. One of the greatest achievements HAL brought to 3D Kirby was in regards to how they handled his float ability. In early 2D games, Kirby's infinite float served the series' main ethos of easy breezy gameplay, allowing you to save yourself from any poor platforming mistake. However, the float is able to be extremely abused, basically letting you skip entire sections and levels by just mashing the A button. In Forgotten Land, Kirby's float is nerfed. Its max height is capped relative to where you start your jump, so you can't just escape the bounds of the level and hang up by the top of the screen. This means that the float really is only useful for those emergency maneuvers to save yourself from falling into a pit or correcting a missed jump, which is the whole reason Kirby had the ability in the first place. Your movement and combat options evolve in complexity as you find blueprints and upgrade copy abilities, which further improves how satisfying the control of Kirby is. Ability upgrades are an absolute necessity for this series going forward. The progression is so satisfying, and seeing clever twists on the many classic powers feels symbolic for Forgotten Land on the whole. I can't see the series without these upgrades. It just fits the mold perfectly, as if it was always been there. Individually, they are so creative and so silly, I never found myself lacking in motivation to play each level carefully and try each new ability. Locking upgrades behind the wealth of this game's currencies and mechanics like Treasure Road or blueprints or star coins or rare gems really forces the player to engage with every aspect of the level. And no, don't worry, I didn't forget mouthful mode. It's so good. Mouthful mode just fits with Kirby. It's goofy, it's a nightmare, it's on brand. Sucking up some machine or other big hulking man-made object changes your ability to fit the level. These work so well because the design moves heaven and earth to tailor its obstacles to work with the new power. Unlike many stage gimmicks found in other games, these sections never make you miss being normal Kirby and rarely overstay their welcome. Taking away the player's regular movement and abilities for a time can often feel bad, a less fun version of the normal experience. HAL changes the flow of a level entirely to perfectly fit the latest mouthful mode, typically in the form of a short, quick burst of festive railroading. This is where the linearity of the Forgotten Land becomes such a smart decision. Streamlining this Giga Swallow to its related challenges sets up an expectation and reward system that never fails. When you suck up a traffic cone, there's gonna be a million things to smash it with. A big cement pipe is just gonna start rolling down hills and off ramps right off the bat, and the car will luckily be parked by a racetrack. And then you have Waddle Dee Town. Kirby games' typical menu systems are cluttered with content, part of the charm of its Sakurai origins, I guess. HAL saw Waddle Dee Town as an opportunity to declutter the menus without removing features, instead adding a small town building system on top of everything else this game does well. At the start of the game, Waddle Dee Town is in complete disarray with nearly the entire town destroyed. Except, thank God, the movie theater's still open, right? As the town grows, so will your list of features and available sub-activities you can partake in. It quickly becomes an efficient solution and utilization of the new 3D environments to improve upon a series tradition with in-game diegetic elements. The town is lovingly crafted, a relaxing way to participate in the game world without conflict, and the NPCs are quirky and expressively animated. Just so much energy was poured into these town folk. Yeah, just fucking take that, Waddle Dee. Take it. I'm sorry. Please get up. It's hard to find an aspect of the game that didn't meet my expectations. Sure, there's no set piece on the scale of storming the halberd in Superstar. The levels are just a bit too constrained in scope to match Kirby's highest of highs in 2D abstraction. There aren't quite as many unique boss fights in this game, and the minigames aren't nearly as in-depth and extensive or fun as past ones. In all these areas, I see potential for growth, but I have confidence that this will not be the only 3D venture for the Pink Puffball. There are so many elements that freshen up series staple mechanics, and Kirby's been needing some freshening up for some time now. Look, I'm gonna be real with you all. After Star Allies, Kirby could only go up from there. I think it's a bad game. Its levels were designed for you not to play them. There's so little asked of the player. It lacks any surprise. The gimmick was poorly tested for single player. Half the time it didn't even feel like you even had to play. Your obligatory AI partners would just beat the level for you, yet striving for collectibles always required you to pull up with a full squad, meaning you couldn't play without them. Combining powers in Star Allies also felt like a lie, as it was as turnkey a system as you could imagine, adding nothing to Kirby's arsenal of abilities. It was a frictionless, rudderless, directionless 5-hour game. I really felt tired by the exasperated formula that began on Wii with Kirby's Return to Dreamland. To me, a radical change in how the stages are designed would be needed, because Star Allies' true failure rested on an utterly, dreadfully boring main campaign. Obviously, going to 3D changes all that, but also changing the setting to Earth brought in new concepts for level geometry that beautifully reinterpret Kirby's abilities. This is why mouthful mode works so well. It goes hand in hand with the new environment. Smart enemy design and placement gave a simple groundedness to each area. Forgotten Land feels more like a place than an abstract Kirby level. You know, like when you're in a Lival Mall and the enemies are just chilling at a table having lunch together, or when they're all lined up waiting to be admitted to this little theme park. For both brand new and classic enemies to have a more established relationship with the environment beyond mere obstacle or utility, invest the player in your silly adventure all the more. It's not just a grassy grass field, but also a mall field. Not just a beach level, but also a construction site beach level. Context is everything. Rethinking platforming challenges around your specific setting is the name of the game today. To me, if you're a AAA platformer, you're going to need this level of detail to continue to surprise the player 40 years after perfecting the genre. Platforming's grammar is so set in stone, you gotta tropical freeze me or I'm out.
Okay.
Kirby succeeds in all these contextually creative twists. But not just this, you gotta give me some textural grit too. There's gotta be some addictive friction to really push the mechanics. The game flexes its gameplay the most in boss fights and in the treasure road segments. If you thought you could coast through the main game using the basic staple of moves with each ability, treasure roads force you to engage more deeply with the breadth of Kirby's abilities. Shadow Mario has taken your flood, all you got now is game knowledge and skill in this abstract abyss of pure game design. For how different Forgotten Land is, what I like most about it is how they made the traditional aspects of the game work in 3D. Retaining that cozy sense of familiarity. Series director Shinya Kumazaki described this game as the new phase for the series and that it will culminate the best aspects of Kirby. Kumazaki has helmed the series for over a decade now, and his dedication to Kirby's cute and wacky world, wonderfully odd continuity, and great boss fights are kind of legendary, and Forgotten Land has not forgotten this important part of Kirby's identity. These are what I argue are the best aspects of Kirby that he refers to. What begins as a simple story against a gang of cute beast critters slowly sprawls out into a grand narrative involving extra-dimensional aliens, interstellar exploration, and frickin' mind control. The Kirby series has always done a great job scaling up the grandeur of its stories, and this game has a satisfyingly climactic conclusion. If it ended normally after the first final boss with credits rolling, I wouldn't be too upset, but I knew my faith in HAL had been well placed, and they pulled out all the stops for this one. Upon returning to Waddle Dee Town, a portal will open up to an altered dimension of remixed, harder version of the game's 6 worlds. It's sort of like a greatest hits album of the game you just beat, with new content and challenges to keep you on your toes. This is when Kirby truly goes full collectathon with 300 unique soul shards to find before being able to access and fight the next true final boss. This strategy of upping the ante finale after finale is the strategy Kirby and Forgotten Land perfects to inspire the completionists in all of us. If you want your players to complete every facet of your game, substantial rewards and story content are a good way to do it. I was on some real runner's high shit by this point. Nothing was stopping me from burning through all the game had to offer. Get all the shards, beat the next final boss, then the Coliseum boss rush unlocks, which has been a staple endgame strategy that has served Kirby well for a decade or two. Tucked away at the end of the hardest Coliseum are usually the truest of true endings. No cap, these boss fights are great. I won't show too much of the end game here, but both mechanically and narratively, the game culminates beautifully, and what started as a cutesy game, frolicking through a field of flowers with some random napping Kirby exposition cutscene, ends up delivering upon that premise tenfold. And once you've vanquished everything, that Kirby afterglow washes upon the player. The apocalyptic scale of Kirby brings any cynical adult to their knees. This game is for real. Truly completing a Kirby game will change a man, especially Tilt and Roll 3 on hard. It took me like legit 2 hours. In every micro and macro scale, Kirby and the Forgotten Land earns a spot atop the franchise's peak and among the best 3D platformers of the last decade. Definitely better than Odyssey, that's for sure. Thank you so much for watching our Kirby and the Forgotten Land review. I hope I said land throughout the video and not world. I always think it's world, but if I did say world, please correct me in the comments over and over again, because the YouTube Elder Gods will be very pleased by that. Otherwise, make sure to subscribe, like, and keep an eye on Turnstyle for future gaming reviews and content. See you there.